Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to people from Asia, and good morning to. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to people from Asia, and good morning to people from Europe. Welcome to today's seminar on transitioning to innovative financing tools, a core from supplier's perspective. I'm Jessie, your moderator today. Financing decarbonization is a buzzword now. As we all know, decarbonization requires a significant financial investment, as the fashion industry is required to cut emissions by 45% in the coming 6 years, which is by 2030, and reach net zero by 2050, as called for in the Paris Agreement. Undoubtedly, energy efficiency program can cut some of the emissions and bring financial returns to the manufacturers, but the leading companies in the industry and many manufacturers have been already collected those low-hanging fruits and get on to the next phase, rapid and deep decarbonization. On that phase, most of the projects will not generate returns, and some of the projects might even increase costs. As a matter of fact, most companies will not put their cash into decarbonization programs in business if they don't own or operate that business. Then the question becomes, who is going to pay for those projects that not bring returns, and some even might increase costs? An expectation from outset is fashion suppliers taking on debt can solve that issue. Is that true? Well, if we map out the carbon emissions along the supply chain from raw materials to end use of the products, it shows manufacturing contributes big part of the carbon emissions of the industry. But does that mean the manufacturers are responsible and capable to decarbonize the supply chain by taking that alone? And if we go back to common sense, that no companies will take a debt if the loan couldn't bring any returns or the risk is too high, then we hop on the other topic. We will cover today, which is from suppliers' viewpoints, what do suppliers need so that they could borrow money at a cheaper cost and with lower risks? Or in another word, what needs to be done so that the fund can be distributed faster to the protection countries and available to much bigger manufacturer group? Before I move to next steps, we prepared a multiple choice question for everyone. You can find it in the chat box. I can also read it for you. So here is the question. The chat box is on the bottom right of your screen. So the question is talking about financing decarbonization. What in your eyes are the main requests? What in your eyes are the main requests from the majority of the suppliers? A. Funds shall be more available. B. Funds shall be more accessible. C. Funds shall be more affordable. D. All of the above. I'm curious to know your answers. We will open polls in a minute. Today, we invited 2 suppliers to share their perspectives, practices, and exploring from financing decarbonization. Let's invite Danuja from MAS and Martin from eChain to the stage. Hi, Martin. Hi, Danuja. Welcome to the seminar.
Hi, Jessie.
Hi. Danuja, would you like to introduce yourself first and Martin goes after?
Sure. I'm Danuji Jayapala. I'm based out of Sri Lanka. I'm working for Amaze Holdings, which is a apparel cut and sew manufacturer. Again, based out of Sri Lanka, but we do manufacture in 13 other countries. So my current role is as the head of environmental sustainability for Amaze Group. And I've been with Amaze for now 12 plus years. So that's almost entirely my postgraduate experience. Yeah.
Martin, would you like to start to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Martin. I'm based in Taiwan with a company named eChain. We are a textile provider, mainly focused on footwear fabrics. We function here in Taiwan, but also in Southeast Asia, including Vietnam and Indonesia. And I'm functioning as the Chief Sustainability Officer for the company.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Danuje. We still have some minutes for the multiple questions, but we have some result now. I can see we have 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. So anyone who wants to vote, it's time now. Lots of people choose all of the above. So funds should be more affordable, accessible, and available. I'm not surprising to that. I'm not surprising to that answer. We will go back to the final result in a minute. Often we heard funds are available. Bankers and banks and funding entities often say the money is just out there in the financial market. I guess it's true, but probably not true to everyone and not accessible to everyone. Before we start, I would like to encourage everyone to input your questions in the chat box. The chat box is on the bottom right of the screen. We will collect questions and cover those questions in the Q&A sessions. Now let me hand over the microphone to Danuje from Sri Lanka, from MAS.
Thanks, Jesse. Let me share my screen.
Sure.
Right. Hope you all can see my screen.
We can. It's quite clear.
Right. So wonderful. So what I'm going to talk about is how the decarbonization should happen and what it means to a manufacturer, especially from global south. And this is obviously some of our experience with some of our customers, while some have been very supportive to us. But I think when you see in a macro level picture, we see that most of the manufacturers are not getting the required support, right? And I'll just show how a manufacturer sees who there are people who might not be manufacturers. I think the whole idea of these seminars is for people to gain understanding of the perspective that manufacturers sees this decarbonization, right? So we'll first start with the apparel supply chain. So this is from research done by Global Fashion Agenda and McKinsey. So when you look at it, you see there's 38% roughly from the apparel supply chain is coming from material production, then 8% from yarn preparation to fabric preparation, that's roughly about 14%, then weight processing, which is dyeing, and 15%, and then cut and make another 4%, right? And then obviously there's impacts on retail, and then when it comes to consumers, there's about product use and end of use disposal cost, right? So when you see this big graph, what you obviously see is a lot of emissions are from manufacturers, right? So when you add these up, usually 2/3 of the emissions are actually from manufacturers. So when a brand sees or a consumer sees, the reductions has to happen, right? So we'll look at where the reduction can happen. So when you to have a decarbonized industry, we need to have raw materials, fabric preparation process, weight processing, cut and trim, transport, retail, product use, end of use, all of these phases to be decarbonized, almost there. So, right, for raw materials, this means production to harvesting that has to be recycled, working on recycled materials. This then fabric preparation process, reduced emissions, or at least decarbonization means renewable energy usage. Weight processing, this means zero emission dyeing. This is not just energy. Sometimes it's the use of water. All of that also contributes. So that how do we reduce that? Cut and trim, much simpler. It's about having more and more renewable energy. Transportation, zero emission transport. I put a question mark whether I'm not so sure whether we'll ever be able to get there. Retail, again, easy, renewable energy. Product use, that has to be done with consumer using renewable energy, and of use, obviously, having recycled. So there has to be a lot of coordination between all these parts for the industry to be decarbonized. When you look at this, it's quite easy. It's a lot to do with renewable energy and sometimes with technology, for example, for wet processing facilities, having better technologies. And raw materials is a little bit complex. It's part to do with recycling and part to do with finding better ways to generate materials. Right. So that's the easy part. Moving on to the next, which is implementation steps. Like I said, having renewable energy, coal elimination, certified biomass, low energy dyeing techniques, efficient manufacturing equipment, efficient utilities, that all need to happen, right? So that's on the manufacturer's side, right? Because the bigger portion is obviously from the manufacturers then. So what we next see is what are the challenges, right? From a product pricing point of view, right? So all of this is easy, but this will have an impact on pricing, right? Sorry. Yeah. So heavy capital investments on renewable energy will impact the pricing. So if you do borrowings, this means there will be a depreciation impact, there will be a interest cost coming into your company. That obviously will be divided among products and will be added to the final product price, right? So the interest rates on developing countries has gone high in the recent past. I can speak about my country, which went to over 30% of borrowing rates, and now it has come down. But I think it was similar for Bangladesh and Pakistan and some of the countries. I think all of these countries are facing turbulent economies. Then renewable PPAs are slightly expensive, but that also needs long-term commitments. Sometimes the manufacturing contracts we get are not long-term. So then what we face is a supplier dilemma, right? So the power dynamics in apparel and textile means that the brands get to demand what they want. So they make the buyer choice of the best option. So that's their best option. Sometimes it's pricing, sometimes it's the sustainability. So let's say if they push on sustainability, they will demand for more renewables, right? And the countries are sometimes not ready to expand on renewables. I'm just taking one of the examples as renewables due to certain reasons, right? It could be country policy or certain limitations in their country itself, right? I'm not taking any example, but those are real restrictions that the country has faced, or it's a bigger policy level decision. So because of that, so you will have to do your own investment to convert it to renewable energy. So that will increase your cost and it will have your higher borrowing cost. So because you have a higher borrowing cost, your buyers or your customers move out. So you are caught in between whether you will invest in renewable energy and get the customers, and once you install, whether you will have higher pricing, so that you will not be attracted to your customer base, right? So the customers are caught in between this dilemma, right? Then if we are looking at a little bit bigger story, so like I said, countries have their own limitation. So global countries have global south countries specifically has a very short investment view. So in the short term, although renewable energies are really low cost in the long term, but the short term costs are involved in renewable energy transition, right? This obviously this cost is prioritized, has to be prioritized over the cost for education, cost for free healthcare, and social welfare in these countries, right? So it's a bigger decision for government to make whether you will transition for 100%, 30, 40% renewable in 2025 or 2030, or whether they while deprioritizing healthcare or education, because all these things are really required for every country. Then when you look at it from a climate justice perspective, there's implementation risk and R&D for all of these. 66% decarbonization also lies with global south or global side manufacturing. And high borrowing cost, obviously due to the country situations or regional economic situations, leads to high default rate and cost. So that means you're either borrowing at really high rate, and even if you can't fulfill it, it means you will be defaulting. And then but the funny part is global north also hasn't moved that far into decarbonization. There's a lot of policy decisions being made, but they are also not there. But at the same time, they are pushing the global south to get there really fast. So globalization usually is about moving a problem from one end to the world to the another, but climate change is a global problem where I think you cannot just ask one part of the world to solve it while you are polluting on the other end. So I think both ends of the world has to meet here to make reductions. And finally, it has to go beyond retrofitting, especially on renewable materials. We need systemic change. How do we source materials, and what are the materials that we can use, and also bring circularity into to the discussion and to the center stage. So considering all of that, I have a couple of suggestions. First one is, I think this doesn't work if we don't have long-term partnerships. That will reduce business volatility and enable collaboration. And I think the other part is the knowledge. There's a knowledge gap within the global south, and there needs to be a lot of R&D funding, and also knowledge transfer has to happen. And finally, concessional funding obviously will help the implementation to be on much faster, because they are basically making all the risks. So that's from my end. Jesse, are we going for questions right now or at the end? You're on mute.
Sorry, everyone. Yeah, I noticed I muted. Did you notice any interesting questions? I think we will go to the questions in a minute, in a short while. And first, I want to thank you first for the very interesting presentation, especially the supplier dilemma. I think the supplier dilemma caused by, I would say, 3 issues. The first is, as you point out, the current pricing models in the industry, that sourcing office metrics didn't include sustainability yet. It's still about price and price only. And the second is probably the geographic context vary from country to country. Like, of course, everyone agrees we have to address climate change today, but each government has different priorities when allocating funds. And it's hard to compete with the need of improved healthcare or improve education. How can you compete? I mean, everything matters. And the third, I think you mentioned is really interesting, is the funds distribution. How to move funds globally faster into global south, into the countries really need it, and how to make sure the suppliers address it access it at a cheaper cost and also with lower risk. So overall, those are really interesting. But also another thing makes me resonated is history. I think the thing is we don't just use core or fossil fuel things today. In fact, coal and fossil fuel are planted deeply in humans' economic activities and production activities for centuries. It's not realistic, actually, to expect fashion producers from production countries to dump coal and move away from fossil fuel in just decades, and expecting them to take care of this issue by taking that alone. So we also need to think about the history, the factor from the history, that globally, coal and fossil fuel in the activities for centuries. And is that possible to ask fashion producers from production countries to actually move away from that and carrying the debt alone? Talking about that, on that note, I know you recently involved into a financing decarbonization white paper led by suppliers. Would you like to share a bit more about that?
Yes. So Jesse, I think our idea is to understand where we can bring this systemic change, mostly on not just thinking as a manufacturer, but thinking the economic perspective of the entire world. So it's not that we wanted to complain, but we wanted to highlight some of the shortcomings of the existing model and find better way to do this. So obviously financing is a problem. Like you said, it's like your question as it's there's a lot of funds, like everybody says it's there, but it's not really accessible. And sometimes even if it's accessible, there's knowledge gaps are there. And then there's a lot of question about application of that funding. So these are some of the things we are trying to explore and find out and share with others, so that different model can be used by brands to financiers and manufacturers, which will bring lesser or faster decarbonization into the world.
Sure. Thank you, Danuji. And I agree with you. I agree with you that you're not here to complain. Actually, no one here is to complain. Of course, we want to be constructive, and we would like to call we would like to call on collective movements. But the thing is, at least we call on collective actions. That indicates the current approach is not collective enough. So I guess the most important thing is we need to understand why the current approach is not collective enough for suppliers. So I think that's why we are here, to talk about the supplier dilemmas and talk about what we can do to move forward. So thank you again for the input, and I noticed some questions for you. We will go back to that in a short while. Now, let me hand over the microphones to Martin. Martin is from Taiwan. And yeah. Hi, Martin.
Let me switch to my slide then.
Great. So I hand over the microphone to you, and then we'll come back to have a short highlight of your input.
Sure. So I'll give a short description of what we are as eChain and some, I would say, thought-provoking steps, also questions, while we are considering going through all the things that we've conducted in the past in regard to decarbonization. Just quickly run through who we are. We are eChain. Basically, like mentioned earlier, we are a fabric provider, mainly focusing on footwear, a little bit of apparel. We are headquartered here in Taiwan. We also have also operations elsewhere in China and Vietnam. And yeah, that's kind of mostly who we are as a company. Just to show you our locations around the globe, mainly in the East Asia and Southeast Asia region. Overall, I think as a company, what we are looking at this whole decarbonization topic, what we wanted to do is to try to achieve what we stated back in 2019, the idea of carbon neutral, to basically transform the way we do business. We wanted to look into the first one, focusing on how we produce materials. So basically looking into how we provide the material itself as a service instead of a product. So we're looking into the idea of how we can transform the raw material source where we get it, whether it's from the so-called technical cycle with man-made synthetic fiber, or it could be from nature fiber, sometimes grow from the soil. So we're looking into different ways to source our raw material to be able to provide. So that's the first point. The second point focuses more on the idea of production, what we call the climate-proof production, how we would look into the ways our facilities are built, the kind of equipment that we use, the type of energy and resources that we consume, including chemicals, and also the waste generated on site. So those are the second points in regard to production. The third point is a little different. We wanted to be more engaged in the community, in the topic where we are kind of go into the whole fashion industry, the whole fashion realm. So we want to be more of a participant, a voice, or a sharing speaker to the whole agenda, to be able to connect, to hopefully gain some insight and provide and also gain resources to support our goals for material and also production, as the previous 2 points pointed out. Aside from that, we wanted to have a core key office that we can build in regard to the whole coming production idea. We're currently building a new office here in Taiwan. We wanted to achieve a double standard, basically green building certification. One of them is more well known, the LEED program from the US. We will be achieving LEED Platinum for this site. Aside from that, we are also having another certification, also from the US, something called the International Living Future Institute. It has three certifications. There's the LBC, the Living Building Challenge, and there's the core certification, which will be the one that we are focusing on. It's a little different from Lee, I would say most of the certifications out there. They requires you or gives you the certification once the design is finished, once the building is being built. The IFI core certification is a little different. What it will be conducting is that they will be recording our usage of the building once it's built. When we have around 80% of participants, or sorry, not participants, I guess user, being set into the building, it will start to track our usage of energy, our usage of water, and all the other related designs in regard to a green building to ensure that the design and the usage are similar, if not the same. So we will actually get the certification 1 year after the building is built. So it's a little different than the past certification that we might know of, and it's something that we wanted to really try out to make sure that we can really accomplish what a design set out to be in regard to the whole decarbonization idea in regard to the energy and water usage. Aside from the site, we are also, like mentioned earlier, looking into different type of source of raw material. And here, just to give you an example, like what we conducted in the past, also relates to the whole financial topic of how we can potentially invest, also to look into different ways to get more support on the farm level to provide a different source of, in this case, cotton, the so-called regenerative organic certified cotton, to be able to work with our partners to be able to have a source that's hopefully supporting the whole decarbonization topic. But in a way, throughout the process, we also need to be supportive to the farmers on the ground, the plantations, to be able to have this kind of transformation ways of plantation to support the system. On the other topic, we also have looked into certain collaborations and projects in regard to waste that ties into both the material topic and also the production topic. What we wanted to do is to set a system to have a circular loop, to be able to have some kind of mechanism to reuse the waste that we got and be able to provide with the partners that we have with those kind of material to turn it back into raw material source. So we had two projects locally here in Taiwan to be able to recycle and reuse the fabric waste, whether it's from used clothes, waste fabrics, or is it from waste curtains, to be able to have that as a raw material source for our production. And obviously that require extra engagement, also investment into the whole reverse logistics mechanism to be able to take back the material, but also to be able to go through the recycling process, whether it's for chemical recycling or mechanical recycling, to be able to use the material source to be back into our system to be reused. And what we have listed here is also we are also overall try to reduce our waste generation as a company and set out a yearly goal to do that, whether it's for external collaborations or internally how we can reuse and recycle that in a manufacturer way. As for energy, I think earlier talk a little bit about. It's the same topic here. We are looking into different ways to get more renewable source, whether it's to get more rack system set up with EAC with the contracts, or to have expanding our rooftop solar capacity to have more on-site generation of renewable energy to be set up. If that's not enough, we also try to look for other external source of renewable energy, whether it's solar, wind farms, or potentially geothermal in the coming, to have some kind of balancing out of our electricity usage. So overall, it's more on the site energy usage. And also, I think earlier we also talked about potentially logistic, right? How can we look into different ways to move our goods around in a low carbon way, whether it's to have some kind of electric vehicle capacity, or to have some kind of biodiesel source to do that. In terms of water, in the past, we've been doing different kinds of research and also development of mapping out how we can basically color our fabrics in a way that's less usage or less intensive on water to have a different method. Also supporting the decarbonization topic that requires a lot more of, in a way, upfront research costs, but also in the time of implementation, how much resource that we can input into this kind of new systems, and how much of that can be accepted by the brand partner that we work with to actually have it out in the market, so we can actually apply those technology and methods into our business. So here we comes to the end, something that we've been seeing throughout our journey to decarbonize. Here I will share a little bit about our thoughts and insights. The first one is more talking about the efforts that we conducted in the past, and basically what's looking into that whole process. What's really our needs and what do we want to see? And what we are seeing today is that some of which is, as stated from A, is some of which just cost. There's really not much we can do. Speaking about per se renewable energy, a lot of the resources that we are looking into to power our whether it's boiler or just electricity that we provide at a site, if we were to switch to renewable energy, most of the case right now is basically adding cost to the operation. You won't get much I guess savings or potentially returns in the future, because it's simply a transformation of resource, raw material source of energy to power your operation. So there's not much we can do about it. So that's something that we realize. That's A. And something that we are also looking into whenever we look into potential decarbonization transformation is the ROI evaluations. Basically, what we wanted to do is that we do want to run some analysis to see if the operation is possible to have a return in the near future, to hopefully to have some kind of support and benefits for the company. So that's definitely something that we are actively looking into, whether it's some project regard to production itself, whether there's something that regard to the water projects that I mentioned earlier, is something that we are actively seeking to understand the perspective. And obviously, like I mentioned earlier, with the first one, some of it just doesn't have any. You are adding cost to the operation by switching to a potentially more carbon friendly operation or resources. For C, what we are also looking into in the past when we are trying to decarbonize is to basically a lot of them have a really high upfront cost, especially when it comes to some kind of, whether I just mentioned earlier with resource usage, or it's based equipment or machinery change. So what we are looking into potentially, if it's possible, to see if there's any external source to support us to reduce the capex to near zero, meaning that it can drastically drop down the upfront cost through different means, whether it's on funding from external support agencies, government subsidy, what have you, to help us to at least to get it started, to have more incentivizations to have the actions conducted. So that's the first one. When we are looking to decarbonization efforts, what we have been experienced and what we are looking into. And in regard to each as a company, what we've done in the past, in regard to these efforts and actions, what we are looking to the financial part are only three means. The first one is more looking to governmental subsidies. So there are a lot of governmental subsidies at the places that we function. But I think just like many of you pointed out earlier, it's not as accessible as we would like it to be. And also when they are accessible, it's actually very troublesome and administrative inhibitive to accept those funds. So it's a lot of hard work to potentially get the subsidies, and sometimes the quantity or the amount that you get is not that great. So that's something we've been experiencing in the past. The second part is talking about certain international grants. A lot of them have some kind of limitation in terms of the type of industry you are to be invested or to be supported, whether it's more focusing on some kind of new tech or startup instead of a more, I guess, traditional, well set up industry, SMEs. Or it could be about how the grant is about in certain locations. They only funding certain type of countries or locations in the global south instead of global north, or the category in the region they are cutting off. It's different than your desire. So it's also difficult sometimes in our past experience to gain those international grants. And C here, basically, it's talking about the others, right? So we are looking to the more conventional ways, whether you're talking about banks or other financial institutions, to gain support to our operations and try to decarbonize in the method that we mentioned above. So overall, what we would like to see going forward with other potential options for some financial support or some financial collaborations, is some kind of brain co-invest, whether it's about some kind of project that we want to run, some kind of new ways of production, or maybe even some materials. And that has happened in the past to have some kind of uh, share financial, I would say, responsibility to support our projects to be able to run, to have some kind of ways to lower our entry of the fees, to have different kind of decarbonization actions. The second part, or B, kind of connects to the earlier point in regard to governmental subsidies, is to have overall easier access to governmental support. A lot of them are trying to support various business to change, but in the end of the day, if it's so hard to get and so administrative inhibitive for us to participate, then it's very difficult for manufacturer to be able to get those financial support. And for C, connected to the grant idea, is to have more open grants, right? So it's more about how much impact can you actually conduct by switching to operation type A to type B, and how much we can actually lower our emission through that process. I think it should be more of the judgment point instead of other criteria that we might have seen in the past based on your status of the company or your location of the company. And in regard to the others, I think it's something that we'll be happy to discuss with all of you here today, is to see what other things that we would like to see. I mean, for us, it's really more about some kind of more collaborative models throughout the whole, I guess you can say, industry, but also the societal chain, whether it's from the governmental sector, from the private sector, or from even the NGO sector, to see and seek a way to collaborate, to set up, to support different kinds of means to decarbonize. And that's something we'll like to have more further discussion with you and to see what we can come up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. It's really interesting, especially the very detailed sharing on the practice of Yichen. And I found it's so interesting, Yichen position itself as a service provider than a producer, and also all the detailed explanation how that transition happens or how that has been done. I had an impression from your sharing that Yichen invest a lot in the R&D capacity. Is that the strategy decided since beginning, or there is a change, or what makes that change, if there is change?
I would say overall, we kind of start to set into this trend around 2018, 2019, to try to set more of, I mean, during that time, we didn't really call it decarbonization. It was more overall on the topic of sustainability and try to look for ways that we can, and during the time, lower our impact for the environment through different means and ways, whether it's about chemicals, whether it's about waste, whether it's about water or material.
Yeah, thank you. And from your presentation, I also noticed that seems there are a lot of researching work to be done on the site, no matter looking into the requirements and also the function of each grant, no matter looking into different techniques or comparing with different solutions and so on and so on. So I'm just curious to know where did you get resources actually when each end needs to make a switch from operation plan A to operation plan B? Or where did you get resources when you needed to decide we focus on this grant application or another grant application or looking for a better financing options? Where did you get the resources?
I think in a way that's one of our strategy in the past to just be out there and participate. In a way, there are a lot of resource out there, whether it's from research institutes, locally or internationally, conferences locally or internationally, events locally or internationally, academia's reports. That's where we look into the potential collaborators or technology to be able to find something that's maybe um, applicable for our operations. And we start to contact them and try to collect data and informations that could be potentially applicable for our operation and to try to see if it's workable. And that's kind of the case in the past for us to have draw different topic lines, whether it's like mentioned earlier on water topics, on chemical topics, on waste topic, to see if there's anybody out there, which I would believe already exists, trying to find solution, whether they are on an NGO level, on a star level, or like a already established business. So in a way, I think it's more about setting out some kind of goal and try to look for resources out there outside of your, I would say in a way, comfort zone, or also outside of your normal participatory area as a company, as a business. And that's something that we've been trying to do more and more so ever since we started the project back in 2019. And try to go out there to be more engaged in with the community and beyond.
Okay, that's really helpful and that's really interesting to point potential directions for the fellow manufacturers to say where they can access resources and where they can find possible potential collaborators. Thank you, Martin. And so I noticed some questions in the chat box for you. We can go back to that in a short while. And now, before we move to the next step, I would like to put a open question in the chat box again. Sorry, just a second. That would be a multiple question again. So is CapEx usually the most challenging part for your company to decarbonize? A, yes, it's hard to get the money to start actions. B, no, we have money. It's about the ROI. And C, no, we have money. It's about finding the right methods, tech, or solutions. D, no, we have money, but lack of commitments. So, yes. So I will give everyone a few minutes to input your vote, and we will open the polls in a short while. And if anyone have some questions for Martin and Danusia, but not yet put into chat box, now is the chance. So let's look at the question. Let's invite Danusia and Martin to the stage again, and we will look at some questions. Danusia, did you notice any questions you found very interesting and you are eager to answer? Or you prefer I select one for you?
No, you go select one. I just read, but yeah, shoot them.
Okay. Okay. So Mohammed is asking a question that do you have any practical example of brand manufacturer long-term partnership? How such partnerships solve those problems, especially from a financial angles? Any example or any, if no alive examples, maybe any interesting imaginations?
Yeah, I think what Yeah. So what a partnership would do is reduce a lot of volatility and thinking around investment. So I think we have few examples. We have jointly invested with guaranteed purchase from customers certain facilities with high focus on sustainability. Almost that's been the 100% focus. So that reduces your risk of borrowing, and you are confident to invest more and more into that. That's one part, and then the other part is your debtor rates. Obviously, even if it's high, you know you will be able to absorb, so you will have a little bit more long-term thinking. What happens in a volatile market is if you are entering a new market and you think there's risk of failure, you will invest as less as possible. This is just common sense, right? So
Thank
then
you.
you think about methods or as the best way. Then I think good examples of partnership models. I think you probably see some of these with Adidas, Nike, Kering, and H&M. And I think what Martin also spoke about was the clean by design, right? So clean by design is a program that's being utilized by a lot of brands. I think that's where I think some of the partnerships are also coming in. Yeah, I hope I answered.
Thank you. Thank you, Danuja. And I think it's interesting we mentioned the clean by design. So basically, it means the brands needs to extend their consideration into the production floor and thinking not just for sales, but also thinking for from a production angle, how to reduce waste and how to cut carbon emissions. That's really interesting. And I think I have a question here. I would like to hear, Martin, hear your inputs. That a question from K and M's. Is there any consent from brands to participate to partnership in financing in carbonization strategies? In your experiences or from what you know?
I think for our case, there are something similar in regard to the question, but I wouldn't call it decarbonization strategies. It was more related to one of the projects I shared earlier in regard to material sourcing. So basically, we have a project that is focusing on ideally a more carbon reducing way of farming for cotton. So one of the idea was that we wanted to bring this product into our one of our material options with the brand, but then there's in a way pre-commitment on the quantity and also the price of that material going forward. So we basically had a contract with the brand to have them sign up to be willing to use that material up to a certain quantity and even up to a certain price. So in that regard, it was, I mean, from our end, in a way, as a big step forward in regard to sustainability co-ownership, to share the responsibility to use that kind of well, it's farming practices, but in the end of the day, for us, it's a material usage a product going down the pipeline to be able to make this happen and make it into the market. So that was kind of one of our past partnership with the brands, I would say, to bring some kind of, I would say, decarbonization methods or like practices into the production, into the market that we are producing.
That's interesting. Thank you, Martin. I have another question. If Danuja is here, I think it's for Danuja that from Zain. You mentioned use certified biomass, certified versus non-certified. Can you please shed some light on what difference it creates in decarbonization context?
Yes, Jesse, I turned off my video because I think I got a message from Hani that's saying lagging a little bit. Yeah.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So certified biomass, I think the current one of the problems that we have encountered is the sustainable use of biomass. So there's a lot of biomass that's coming into the market, at least on my experience, due to expansion of the development especially in our region. Obviously, the forests that once used to be forests are now turning into cities. So obviously, there's a lot of trees that are coming in, but we don't see this as a sustainable source. So and that's probably not the way to operate. So one of the ways is to look at sustainable certification, where they will look at how the longevity of the plantations and whether biomass is actually planted as a energy crop. So certification, somewhat, I would say 100%. It somewhat helps to make sure that the carbon is secure and it's sequestered and it's actually carbon neutral. So that's the idea of having certified biomass.
Thank you, Danuja. And I noticed there is another question. I'm actually curious for both of your input. So the question is from Arif. Is about, is there any platform, structure, or a community of practice to give access to SMEs to access sustainability supportive fund from, for instance, buyers or funding entities and so on. So basically between small SMEs and supportive fund from buyers or any funding entities, is there any structures, resources, platforms, or community to help SME to access those part of funds? Martin, would you like to go first from your experiences or thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the point that we shared earlier in regard to especially where we are in Taiwan. It's more focusing SME through governmental channels. But I think the tricky part is that the limitations and the amount of paperwork and documents that you need to go through is quite tedious. So it's definitely something to be worked on, hopefully in the future, to provide more support for SMEs to be able to participate ways to access funds for sustainability reasons. And I'll just give you one example. One of the reasons why the government is trying to promote and to support is to have like at least 10 SMEs bundled together to apply. And you're looking at it, you're like, oh my gosh, it's already hard enough to convince everybody in my company to apply and to go through all these paperwork. You need to ask me to get 10 more, I mean 9 more others to apply. It's almost impossible. So it's a lot of these kind of well-intended policies and also funds that we are seeing. They are linking the actually accessibility and also the easiness to actually be applicable to the operations. That's something we have faced in the past. Aside from that, we have yet to see any, like I would say, easy access and then obvious funds or support to the SMEs in a financial way.
Thank you, Martin. That's a very good example to say 10 SMEs bundled together to apply fund. Yeah, to go through the documents preparation and to convince each other. That's really overwhelming work. And Danuja, do you have any thoughts on this question? To any words for SMEs to access some supportive fund?
Yes, Jesse. So I think the point of accessibility, yes, there's a lot of funding available where they can access, especially with this for SMEs. I think one of the examples that we have seen in our country is recently there was $150 million to $200 million, if I remember correctly, was allocated to one of the private banks, and that was specifically for the use of SMEs, not for the big players. So the idea was that the bank pitched to, I think, Global Climate Fund or through ADB to Global Climate Fund to access that funding. So it's a part of a larger disbursement, but the target was SMEs. So I think the financial sector can be called for support targeting SMEs. So it will be bundled um, and it will be dispersed into smaller manufacturers and smaller enterprises. Like you understand that it's about handling the overheads of managing smaller and smaller components of the loan. So smaller banks who are well equipped to manage SMEs will be the best to access this funding and get for them. I think that's one of the models they can actually work for decarbonization and sustainability.
Thank you, Danuja. I noticed that there is an interesting question for Yichen and also one more question about REC, also from Geoff. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. So we'll come back to those questions soon, very quickly. And now I want to open the poll with Danuja and Martin to take a look. Oh, we still have some remaining times, but now, if anyone not vote yet, this is the chance. We have 2 minutes left. So I will come back to you, Martin, to say if you feel surprised to the answers we collected from the polls. And now I want to have a small reminder here about rating our seminars. So yeah, very quickly we will come back to the remaining questions in the chat box. And now I just want to say we greatly value your feedback on today's seminar. You will see in the chat box there is a rating link. Please do leave your rate over there. We will take a look and use it to improve our future seminars. I will give everyone 3 minutes and come back to the session after 3 minutes. So let's come back to the poll. Oh, we still have some time left. Okay, we can come back to the questions. Martin, I think there are 2 questions from Geoff. One is about REC. REC are not additive. This is a cost-only option to offset carbon emissions. What is the motivation to consider RECs in a decarbonization strategy?
It's a simple question to answer for us. It's the simple motivation is it's easily recognizable from a lot of our brand partners, and they would like to see us do it. And it was during the time it was easier to get and not as prices is now. So we took the opportunity to do it. So that was kind of what it is. But obviously, yeah, like you said, it's really an additive to the cost of our operation and not supportive to the to the financial savings, so to speak. So the simply motivation, just something that's easily recognizable, and it can, I guess, add to our points to decarbonize as a manufacturer for the brands. That was what it is. Yeah.
Okay, then the second question from the same person for you as well. Is the contract you mentioned for a more sustainable textile supply a commitment from the buyer over multiple product seasons in order to achieve the necessary volume?
Yeah, actually, I wrote in the chat, I say yes. So simply put, that was kind of what it is. So basically, there's a set amount of quantity, along with a set price that we have agreement with the brand to be able to have that material order set in place. That we can also work with the farm to be able to provide the materials. Yeah, simply put, yes.
I found that thank you, Martin. And I found that is actually an interesting question I'd like to ask Danuja as well. That do you have any, for instance, examples to show the commitment from buyers over multiple product sessions to achieve a necessary volume so that easier for the company to handle the decarbonization actions? Any examples or any experiences?
I think I'll go first. So I think what I can say is not just on decarbonization, a lot of our efforts on sustainability was driven by some of the key customers that we worked, and that was worked in a partnership model. So there were times that were tough for us, and there were times tough for them, and we were working as a partnership to make sure that we deliver what they want. So I think it has worked a lot for our organizations to move as a very sustainable company, and it has given us confidence that there will be people who will be able to support us throughout I'm saying even the product price wise. So I think I think at least our top customers are thinking in the same bandwagon. Um, the I would say the challenging part is you don't see that number growing that much. Uh, so we would like to have similar like-minded customers onboarded further to continue our journey. So yes, it's definitely helped to have a partner like that.
On that note, it sounds like we also need to cultivate customers, right? Not just to cultivate consumers, but also not just to cultivate consumers on sustainable products, but also cultivate customers, brand customers on sustainable products. And I noticed a question from Sakib, very interesting for, I think, I would like to have both of you input, which is, does OPEX play a crucial role in shortlisting projects? Martin, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I would say yes, actually. So the CapEx question was from me because I think that a lot of times when we are looking into new methods and technology or even materials, the CapEx is always high, right? Like you're trying to change the way how we use the function, and there's always some kind of investments or upfront costs to prevent you from doing so. But I think aside from that, what a lot of times what we are trying to do nowadays is to really look into the OpEx to see what would be the long-term operational costs in practice would be. Because we are hoping to have that to be changeable or at least something that's ideally supportive going forward in the future, with more and more actions, policies, or requirements set in stone for sustainability needs to decarbonize. We hope the OPEX was slowly, if not sooner than later and faster, to lower down. So in that regard, it will be more beneficial for us to be, I guess you can say, the early adapter to be engaged with those kind of technology and methods, to get into those kind of technology or changes as soon as possible. So yes, it definitely play a crucial role in our shortlisting projects that we are when we look into something where we have the calculation done, we want to make sure that the OPEX is something that's visible, that we can see the potential change and that we can be in a way variable to see what that would look like compared to the capex. They could be similarly prohibitive, but if the opex seems to be something that we can see a bright future or like a potential drop, we might still consider doing it anyway because that's something that's going to change. Maybe not the capex immediately, but the opex will be different, as maybe there is some kind of carbon tax or some kind of regulation that is set up that require us to conduct those action anyway.
Thank you, Martin. And Danusia, what's your idea on this question? Does OPEX play a crucial role in shortlisting projects?
Yes, I think it comes down to the amount. Like um, uh, like Martin explained, it's about usually it's about capex and how do you fund it. But what happens with the capex is your depreciation cost comes into your P&L, and so how much of that will impact the product is finally the question. So OpEx at a smaller cost might not be that much of an effect at the end. So that's why people neglect, but sometimes the OpEx costs come so big in certain instances. So sometimes it depends. It doesn't necessarily say that having everything on OpEx is better. So sometimes investing certain things and then your depreciation effect might be less and you debt fund it. So all of that will have an impact on your taxes. So it's a lot of financials, but it depends on how much it impact your profit and loss statement at the end. So it depends on the quantity.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Danusia. And since we're talking about CapEx and OpEx, let's look at the poll. We have interesting result. So most answers for option A, followed by B. Very few on D and none for C. So basically, most answers on A. Yes, it's hard to, let me see. So most answers on A. It's hard to get money to start actions. And followed by B. No, we have money. It's about the ROI. Interesting, it's about the ROI. And nobody chooses C. No, we have money. It's about finding the right methods, tech, or solutions. So good to know that seems at least everyone here today have access to find right methods, tech, or solutions. And very little on D. We have money, but lack of commitment. So Martin, do you feel surprised to the result?
I mean, I honestly did not have any expectations, so it's not surprised or not surprised. Just curious to see where we are at, in the industry. So I mean, it's reasonable, I would say, for A and B to have more, um, yeah, preference. Because I think in a way we also belong into that group, depending on the projects. So.
And Danuji, how do you feel about this poll? Lots of answers on A, and followed by B. No one chooses C. A little bit on D.
No, I think A is what people feel the most, because I think investing on capital expenditure means you are committing for long term kind of a feeling. So I think it's a commitment problem. uh, so yeah, I think this is common among any company. So do you think twice or thrice? It's like buying a new car. How many times do you think? Versus buying food, probably you spend the same amount. Yeah. So yeah, it's just how people feel about things.
Yes, that's very true. Either people don't have money to even start the action, either there might be some fund, but then you have to consider about the ROI. Basically, no one would invest into something it's not just that there's no return, but it probably will increase the cost. Then in the long run, it's not doable actually, and especially also in the current business model, in the current pricing models, the sourcing offices the sourcing mix, let's say metrics, don't just reward companies with lower carbon footprint, but still focusing a lot on prices. So yeah, it's a very candid conversation we had today. I'm very happy Martin and Noje joined the seminar. I saw we probably have some questions as well. And just want to remind someone posted interesting resources in the chat box about about a report or about some information, I think. So I noticed we have very little time left. So thank you again, Martin and Danusia, for the input. I would like to. Do you have any final words for our audience today? And Martin, do you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the questions about, like what are we facing in regard to the, different kinds of decarbonization action that we have, and how do we communicate that with our brand partners, whether they are really still focusing more on cost or they are having some kind of meters, in regard to sustainability, so we are able to conduct more actions and also research. That is, to be honest, something that's ongoing for us. It's really not like clear, I would say, that certain actions or certain research will come into fruition, so to speak. But overall, as a company, we believe it's coming towards us as the future trend. It's what we are seeing and what we needs to be done. So in a way, regardless of our brand partners' ambitions or their willingness to, in a way, pay for the solution that we are trying to provide, we are heading this direction, and we are trying to find our little bits of ways to get it into the collaboration mindset, or also projects like the ones mentioned earlier in regard to some kind of commitment contract, to get a little foot in the on the ground to be able to start to work on the topic and issue. So I think, to all of you out there, what I would say is that it's definitely something that's worth looking into. It's very important as the world is heading toward more and more efforts to decarbonize for what the world has to become. You just need to be patient and find your ways to get, potentially your funding, your right partner, the right buyer, whether it's from for profit, government, or even nonprofits, to get the project rolling and starting. So yeah, that's all.
And Danusia, would you like to have some final words to our audience today?
Yes. So I think what I want to say is the presentation I did is not to blame anyone. It's just to challenge the current practices that we have in the industry and find a better way to do it. What I feel is right now we kind of are in a, I would say, in a prisoner's dilemma. We do not know what's the next move your opponent is going to make. So because of that, we do a lot of work with a lot of reservations. But I think to solve this crisis, we need to have a lot of collaboration, brands to manufacturers, manufacturers to manufacturers, as well as brands to brands as well. So I think that needs to happen in the sustainability space and decarbonization space to actually get somewhere with this.
Thank you, Danuja. Thank you. And I think just want to make a small note. Often we talk about be constructive and building something new, but I think before we move on to construction, we needed to deconstruct the barriers first. You needed to clear the ground first. So I think today we covered a lot on that part. And before I move on to the closing statement, I just want to say I loved the last part of discussing in the chat box that someone said no answer for C, just suggests people are not ambitious enough in electrifying steam. And I saw Martin, you answered, or it's about A and B, things people think they know the solutions already. Yeah, I love that. Manufacturing often they know the solutions. They know what to do to solve the problems. The problem is not about knowing or not about knowledge sharing. The problem is about unblock their capacities, especially unblock their capacities on financing and also help them to get easier access to finance. So yeah, thank you, Martin, and thank you, Danuja. And we have a few minutes left. I'd like to summarize a few takeaways from our today's seminar. We have been covered a lot today, from narratives to practices. Financing decarbonization is a big topic. So much geographic context and historical context and unevenly developed supplier networks involved into this topic. But if we could bring it down, we might find it's actually a simple question. I'll directly quote from a report released by Transformers Foundation last year. I can post the link later. So back to the theme. If we can burn down this big topic, we will find it's actually a question about who pays what. It leads to another question. Are suppliers responsible and capable to pay the whole decarbonization program on their own? So from bankers' viewpoints, from funding entities' viewpoint, funds are always there. It's always there available. Then the real question is probably how the rules are set. What financing tools there could have to what financing tools there are left for suppliers so they could borrow money at a cheaper cost and with lower risk. Or maybe you can ask, how can the financial risks shared with suppliers, where suppliers borrow money to decarbonize the supply chain? And Danuja and Martin shared a lot of their thoughts and insights on those questions, where brands could support the initiatives through higher prices and lower, like for instance, brands could support their initiatives through higher prices and longer term contracts and business commitments as a minimum. As Martin mentioned, brand co-invest in decarbonization programs. As some of other suppliers mentioned, brands could also invite not just like trade financing initiatives, but also invest in facilities or infrastructure. And I'm thinking if we can also separate who does how much from who pays, we will see suppliers are expected to handle the bulk of the fashion industry's decarbonization work, as it's their facilities and operation. True. But again, brands and retailers or funding entities could contribute collectively alongside by calling for a to redesign the financial support system, or most important, change the current sourcing pricing model to reward companies with lower carbon footprint. So that would be I think we are running out of time. That would be the call for today's from today's seminar. And a big thanks to Danuja and Martin. And big thanks to everyone joining the seminar. Remember to rate our episode and see you next time.